This is Take a Cue, episode 19.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to Take a Cue. I'm Jen Wise, 4th and 5th grade instrumental music teacher.
And I'm Erik, 8th grade band and jazz band director.
We are two veteran educators with over 35 years of experience teaching in New Jersey public schools between the two of us, and we're excited to bring teaching experiences and insights to you.
I'm super excited. Whether you're just starting out in your teaching career or you've been teaching longer than we have, this show will help you grow with new ideas and perspectives about music education and teaching.
We hope you'll be just as inspired as we are every time you listen. Before we begin, if you enjoy our podcast, please help us out by doing a few very easy things.
First, subscribe on your favorite podcast app.
Then make sure you rate the podcast and leave a review.
It helps people find our show who haven't yet, and we really appreciate it.
If you find that you get a lot out of our episodes, we'd be grateful if you considered becoming a monthly supporter to help us grow the podcast.
You can sign up to make a secure monthly payment using the link in our show notes or on our Anchor site, anchor.fm/takeaq. That's all one word.
Also, if you have questions or comments about anything you hear on the episode, come and interact with us on social media. We are Take a Cue Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Erik, this is part 2.
Yes.
We
get to continue our chat with John and each other about interviewing, getting that job, what to do, what not to do, everything you could want to know. And we pull back that curtain and we talk to John from the other side of the interview table.
Yeah.
And if you enjoyed the first half, you're going to get some more great information now on the second half.
Mm-hmm. You even find out what to wear. I discuss my scandalous interview, outfits and attire. So no, just kidding. But really, it's important. How you present yourself is a big deal. And we go into some pretty good detail about what works and what might not work for everybody in this episode.
So we're going to pick it up here on the demo lesson and possible teacher performance part of the interview process. Mm-hmm. And then we'll take it from there. We're going to talk about the what to do after your interview process before the job is offered or not. And then what to do after you're offered the job. Yeah. We also talked with John about some of the more memorable interviews and interview stories that we have. And yeah, I think if you really enjoyed the first half, you're going to get a lot out of the second half too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're here to help you set yourself up for success and to land somewhere where you want to be. So, let's get in on this conversation. It's an important one.
Bingo. Let's do it.
Okay.
You've gone from getting your resume looked at to getting the interviews, maybe several interviews, and now they're calling you to do the demo lesson, which I know is not nerve-wracking for anybody. So, John, I want to know from an administrator standpoint, obviously you're looking to see, can they work with kids? Like that's obviously number one. But I'm curious, what can a candidate do to stand out to you in the demo lesson or demo lesson type situation?
Well, I think the first thing is connecting with students. So I think it's great when the candidate stands at the door, greets every student, fist bump or whatever. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hopefully they've got name tags so that they can, he can call on people by name, or she or they. And I think it's that connection, number one. Then number two is having some sort of structure to a lesson. So obviously there's a learning objective. We know where you want us to go, and then we know, okay, how you want us to get there. And having some sort of, I don't know, I watched a demo lesson last spring that was so good. It resonated around this theme of polishing. It was a band rehearsal for middle school. And the candidate kept bringing back this idea of, let's see if we can polish that a little bit. And so they could sort of twist it and say, oh, that rhythm wasn't quite together. Let's see if we can polish that a little bit. And I think just having the correct pacing, keeping things interesting so students are engaged, the things that we all do as educators in a video game world. How do we keep kids engaged and moving, and how do we keep it exciting, interesting? I look for people that play more than talk, and certainly have some sort of structure to the end of the lesson as well, and then connect with students at the end, thank them, and as they're exiting, again, making a contact with them as they're leaving, as opposed to we saw one candidate last year who just was like packing up their instrument after the lesson. I also, in this really impressive lesson, the candidate played for the students. So I think the warm up right away was just call and response with the trumpet, starting on a nice, gentle B flat, and getting the students engaged right away, playing right away.
Wow. That sounds like the kind of demo lesson everybody would want to give.
It's easy for us to say.
Yeah, right.
Before Billy, I had a student today, his valves, couldn't get his valve back together. And it was like, oh, okay, here we go. I said, get a spare trumpet. Give me that one. I'll fix it after band, and let's move on,
I hear that. I had my demo lesson for Livingston when I actually, got the job. I took the advice of the current band director, and he was like, sometimes I just put on smart music. I put on the loop function, and when they're done putting their instrument together, they join in. I was like, okay, if that's what they're used to, I'll do that, because that's what they're comfortable with. And then I put it on, and they had no idea. They were looking at the music. They're sitting there just kind of soaking their reeds for an extra second, looking at the music like, yep, not sure what to do here. I'm taking an extra second to put my instrument together, and I was like, it was really awkward. And so I started playing, I brought my instrument, like you said, I started playing it. I started demonstrating. Anybody want to join me? Anybody? How about we look at just that first note? What's that first note? And it was like, okay. And then I'm looking at my clock like, oh man, this is a time suck. I got 30 minutes here and we're 6 minutes in. The warm up should be done and over by now. And, I was like, okay, so I took that advice. It didn't work for this particular group. Let's move on. Okay, we'll explore this warm up maybe later. Maybe what we do today, we'll circle back to this and see if it helps us learn, what we need to do to make this warm up happen. And that was one of those demo moments where it was like, I thought I was going to start this way, and it did not work, and it did not engage everybody in the room. Like, I think there was one student like playing the loop every time, and he assembled his instrument in like 10 seconds. It was like, ready to go. But everybody else was like, yeah, I don't know what you're looking for here. So,
wow.
It's so hard. Demo lessons are so difficult because you don't know the students. You don't know where they are. You don't know what they've been working on. I like to work on just, right away from posture to attacking a note and releasing it together. That's it. Let's see if we can start a concert B flat beautifully together and end it together. Not as easy as we all would like it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I go in not like I've done this recently, but when I've gone in to do demo lessons, I always think of it from the standpoint of, hey, I'm their guest artist today. I'm going to come in and I'm going to hear what they're playing, and I'm going to be like, I'm the invited guest. I'm the outside expert that's going to come in and work with them on something. And I think having that confidence is good, because I think it draws the kids in too. And I know my big one that I did for pretty much every demo lesson I've ever done is balancing the pyramid of sound. I think I did it at Madison. I did it at Livingston. I think I did it at Wyckoff. That is something you can always work on with a middle school band or any band, anywhere, is that balance. But trying to find that, that idea that you can bring into any rehearsal is really important. Like starting and ending notes together, or, how do we begin a rehearsal together. Having that in your pocket ready to go is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Erik, you saw my demo lesson in Livingston. And I definitely got sucked in to that a little bit because I was working with a band that I knew had a lot of technique like in there, but they weren't sitting up straight. They weren't breathing with me. They weren't playing together. They weren't starting their notes together. And all of a sudden we're 10 or 12 minutes into my demo lesson. I'm like, oh, wow, we're still trying to play together. Okay, I have to move on.
Yeah.
And I got sucked into that a lot because that was the standard I wanted to set, and I wanted to breathe and play, and I wanted them to be with me. And it just like wasn't whatever was happening in that room before I walked in, that wasn't the system that was set up. So like, I do feel like walking in front of like stepping in front of a large ensemble is a very different demo lesson than stepping in front of a lesson group, a group of 4 or 5 or 6. Because in front of that full ensemble, you've got to balance a lot of personalities.
And when we walk into an unknown, there are certain key things that we do, certain strategies that we might have to do more than we might do if we were the regular teacher. So, for example, I might explain right away, hey, in my band room and where I was taught, we had so many students that if you had something to say, you had to raise your hand. So let's practice that now. Everybody's sitting and not talking out, and raising your hand and just like practicing even some classroom management things. So I'd love to hear from you. Also, we don't play. So after I stop, we're just going to wait for silence. No talking, no playing. Okay, then we can go forward. I always use glow and grow. So I would stop the ensemble and say, oh, by the way, first of all, thank you for stopping. I know that's hard to do because we're all excited about playing. We're all artists. But I just have to tell you, that tone quality, you guys sounded so mature. You sounded almost like a college band. It was really, really a wonderful sound. But I'd like you to do one thing differently, and that is it was all the same sound, and it's written that we should crescendo as we go through this phrase. So again, keep the beautiful tone, but let's see if we can increase the dynamic as we go through this phrase. Can we do it? Let's
John,
go.
you're hired. You're hired.
yeah, John's hired. There's a really interesting point though, and that is like trying to get a pulse on where the group is, and even make the demo lesson, even if it's not necessarily all about the music, just make it about, even if it's just how do we sit and not talk. Let's practice stopping and then listening. I do that with my 8th grade band pretty much every week now. I don't think I ever would have thought of doing that in a demo lesson.
Yeah, and I often refer to in a professional rehearsal, you can't do this. You can't, when the conductor stops, you stop because A, you don't have time. B, you're never going to get hired again because, there's so many great musicians out there. This guy's out. Let's bring in the next drummer.
So John, is it more important to have like a bang up lesson plan, or should we just like in a demo lesson be working on like the basics and just getting what we really want out of the people in front of us?
As part of the warm-up, just saying, let me do some diagnostics just to sort of see where we are. Just like a soccer coach would say, okay, we're going to do some running. We're going to do some passing drills. We're going to do some shots on goal, and just sort of see where we are before we play the game. So I might use that analogy, and you can do it quickly as part of the warm-up.
Yeah.
And then the game is the band piece.
Yeah, taking that pulse of the ensemble is important.
Yeah.
Or of the lesson.
Right.
Even if it's a small group lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting, Jen. You had asked about your demo. I think you did as well as anybody could have done with that group. Jen came in and was like calm and had like an air of confidence, which was awesome. And that's exactly what that group needed, to be in front of them, because they were a rowdy group. They were a really, really rowdy group.
we had a lot of fun and we made some really good music, but I
Yeah.
very much knew when I stepped off the podium that I was not going to be the one, because I don't know. It was just like, it wasn't sparkling. I didn't feel like I connected with that group like I really wanted to. And when I sat down with my now supervisor, after the lesson, we talked it through, and she was asking me, well, what would you do differently? I said, I really was trying to get what I wanted out of that group, but we just weren't finding that medium where it was going to happen. I said, so, it just we just weren't finding that rhythm. And, I'm not, maybe I would have done less of a warm up. Maybe I would have, because they seemed really engaged in the repertoire. Maybe I would have dug into the repertoire sooner. But what they really needed was a warm up. They just didn't want to hear that. What they really needed was some technique. But that group wasn't ready to hear that. But I pushed it. I pushed for that, and that's why I'm not in front of that group. Like that. That's it. That's pure and simple, why that one went the way it did. And
I'm so glad, by the way, that you are in front of the groups that you are in front of, and that you're a colleague in the district, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, things are great because we left that interview, and again, Mara, our supervisor, said, listen, if I could take two of you, I would. And this is great. We've had great conversations over the last, couple times I've gotten to meet with you. And I didn't believe it. I didn't believe she'd call me again. I didn't think anybody would, ever call anybody again that went through the whole demo lesson and didn't, land there. But she did. She called me again. And when, my predecessor retired and interviewed me again and went through the demo lesson again. And I guess that's the right fit. This is where, this is where I belong in this district, but that was a cool experience to get that call again after going through all those steps and having all those conversations. So
that's an important takeaway too. Just because you didn't get, a particular job, don't burn bridges, because you never know.
Oh, no. You never know.
Yeah. You still write the thank you note. You still send the thank you email. Yeah,
definitely.
Yep.
And what we used to do after a demo lesson is we would then go meet with the candidate and say, okay, what went well? What would you do differently? Mm-hmm. Because we know demo lessons are always imperfect. So let's reflect on it a little bit. And we would learn a lot about the candidate from that. Then we would say, okay, here's where we are in the process. We're down to the final two candidates. We're going to make a decision by Friday. If for some reason we don't make that decision, I will call you so that you don't have to go through the weekend wondering, well, I thought I had a good demo lesson. I haven't heard anything. Mm-hmm. So I always kept candidates in the loop. Unfortunately, that's not always the case with administrators. But having gone through interviews myself, I knew what it was like to suffer through a weekend when you didn't know what was next. So I would say either we'll let you know by Friday, or I'll call you and say, hey, we're not anywhere closer. We're still working on it. One strong thing is, because we're all comfortable with our personal horn, bring your horn to the demo lesson. If it's a band or orchestra lesson, and either play or sing and model for the students, because we all know from brain science that's the best way for us to learn.
Yeah.
It also shows the principals and the other people who are sitting in on the demo lesson that, this person's a good musician. They sound good.
Speaking of that, John, I wanted to ask you just a little bit that I know most districts that I've interviewed at did not require me to come in and play my instrument. Madison did. I think that was the one time that anybody asked me to do it. Jen, have you ever had this experience?
To play my instrument in an interview? Yeah. I've had that several times. Yeah.
Okay.
I interviewed in Greenwich, Connecticut for an elementary band position, and they asked me to bring my instrument. I had a few things prepared. I totally flubbed in the middle of like a Bach sonata something, and And the supervisor was just like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry. I just wanted to make sure you knew how to hold the thing. And I was like, oh, thank you for that. He's like, we've had some people come in with a resume that we thought was one thing, and then they actually played for us and it was another, and it's, oh, okay. So I did okay in the performance aspect of it. So in episode 1, we talked about my interview in West Milford, New Jersey, where they asked me to play my primary instrument, but neglected to tell me to bring my instrument. And I ended up borrowing a newly donated intermediate instrument from them. And I encourage you to go back to episode 1 to hear this story, because it's pretty entertaining.
It's a great story.
It's a good one, and it ended up actually getting me my job in Ringwood. So I'm not going to tell the whole thing right now. This is a little teaser for you to go back and listen to episode 1, because this is a fun one. But the performance in an interview thing, I think a lot of people really just want to know that you are who you say you are. And I've been asked to perform on my secondary instrument as well. So in MAWA, when I interviewed for MAWA, they asked me to perform on my secondary instrument. I looked at the panel. I looked at who was interviewing me: a tuba player, a clarinet player, and an elementary principal. And I said, well, I can't possibly bring out my clarinet in front of a world-class clarinet player. And so what else can I do? And, since I played trombone and marching band in college, and I had some pretty good experience on trombone, I said, I'll bring that out. And I played a Rochu etude on trombone and something else. And they asked me, so if you were, a freshman trombonist and you just played that, what would you say to that student? What would you say about what they just played for you? And I thought that was a good question to ask after I played, because they assume on your secondary instrument that you're playing at a lower high school level, and I thought that was really an appropriate question to ask after I played. So keep that in the back of your mind if you're asked to perform on a secondary instrument, not your primary in your interview.
John, what are your thoughts on it? On playing, because like I said, you're one of the few administrators who had requested that I play, and I'm assuming that this is a regular thing that you have asked applicants in the past.
No, it's just for
what
you.
Are your thoughts? Talk to us about it.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, I just think,
yeah.
Again,
yeah, no, he
part of
just me. He just wanted to hear me.
No, I mean, an administrative team is trying to make sure that they're hiring the best person for their students. And part of the piece is, can they model well for the students? Fortunately, I've heard so many incredible musicians who've been interviewing over the years for positions, and it just gives them that opportunity to shine. 99% of them sound fantastic. The secondary instrument is also, positive. Of course, for choral positions, we always ask to have them play piano. So it's, again, part of this in the back of my mind is always, if a parent calls and say, why did you hire person X? You can say, well, great interview, great demo lesson. They played their instrument for us. They're a terrific musician. They're ready to go. And we check their references. This is a great candidate.
Nice. So the person now, the interviewee, has gone through the interview process. They've gone through all of the demo lesson, teacher performance. They've met with administrators several times. I think at Wyckoff, I had 5 or 6 different interviews scheduled throughout the time. So they've gone through all of this. What do you want to see from a candidate after they've gone through the interview process, before they've been necessarily offered the job? what can they do to continue to stand out at that point? What do you expect to see?
Well, usually my job as a principal would be kind of over. So we would say, our superintendent would say, please send me one or two candidates after the committee goes through, their motions, whatever they think is best, and then it's kind of out of my hands. I'll call the candidate and say, I just want to let you know that you are our finalist, and we are going to send you forward to meet with the superintendent X, and you're going to get contacted by that person's secretary, who is so and so, and I'm sure you'll be fantastic because you were fantastic in our interview. The superintendent might ask you some of the same questions, maybe something a little bit differently, but just do what you did for us, and you're going to be great.
So what about, before that decision has been made, while the process is still ongoing, does everybody send a thank you note or a thank you email, or is that pretty rare? What's your experience as an administrator regarding that?
Usually it's an email to the committee, to everybody who was in the team, but I'm a big fan of handwritten notes as well.
So
yeah.
You asked me a question in my interview, and I went home and I couldn't sleep that night. And I had to tell you that one thing that I didn't answer in the interview. Should I send that in an email the next day along with my thank you, or should I just let it lie?
Well, I think every administrator who I've ever met is working crazy long hours, just such a plethora of tasks on their plate, important things, working with challenged students, challenged parents, challenged staff. People are having a rough patch, and I'd say less is more. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'd be so excited to work with you and the students of your district. I look forward to hearing from you soon.
Yeah,
Sincerely.
I was afraid you'd say that because I stepped in that hole before, I'm sure. But thank you for that. I need to hear that,
Yeah, but if the administrator calls you and says, here's where we are in the process, if you feel like it's comfortable, then you could say, thank you so much, because I lost some sleep over one of the questions. And the supervisor will probably go like, I don't even remember that. How we all perseverate over little, minutia that keeps us up at night.
Right.
And my experience is quite often those things are quite big at 3 a.m. and the next morning they're kind of minor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's true. It does seem very large. It looms large to the interviewee, but the interviewer probably didn't even notice, or didn't even think much of a particular answer.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, and I know this maybe is a question for all of us about our own personal experiences, but once you've been offered that job, there comes the time to negotiate salary. And for, at least here in New Jersey, this is the one time you get to negotiate your salary in that district. And I'm kind of curious what have been your experiences. I know when I came to Livingston, I did not negotiate my salary because they already offered something that I thought was reasonable. But have you had any experience, either of you, in negotiating salary at that point?
Yeah, I'm a little shy about that because in New Jersey, I feel like compared to a lot of places in the country, we are pretty fortunate with teacher salaries. When I was part-time in MAWA, I was 4 days, 0.8, 4 full days. And when I was offered the position in Livingston, the first offer I got was based on what I was making in my previous district, not like what I was making, per 0.2, but what I was making for those 4 days. And I had to look at that number and say, well, wait, but like I will be working 5 full days for you. I will be working a full-time position, and I was 0.8 before. I'd like something comparable, to what I was getting, and have it be over 5 days, not 4. So I had to have that conversation with our HR person, not the superintendent, and then that person took it to the superintendent, and I had to wait. and wait and wait in the in the office for a few minutes, and that was a long wait. But I having it, be my third position that I was going into, and a place where I really did want to be for a while. I kind of stuck to my guns a little bit, and the HR person said to me point blank, like, this is your chance. Like, really, like, take your time. I'm going to push some papers around for a second, look at this number, do the math. Like, she was very gracious about it and said, really make sure this is the number you want to leave with. And when I sat there for a minute and said, I know I was part-time, but when we look at it, I'd like to be over five full days, like make that math work for me. And she went to the superintendent, and I, ended up with the closer to the number that I wanted. So that was good. Coming in, I weighed the numbers pretty heavily as well, because I was offered, again, back to episode 1, I was offered some positions in Connecticut that were significantly less than what I was offered here in New Jersey. And I was willing to take a position that would have been more of a challenge, like teaching wise for me, than it would have been in the one I was offered in Connecticut, but I would have made a lot more. So those are things you have to, weigh as well if you're offered more than one position.
And this was earlier in your career. This was not when you were interviewing in Livingston.
No, this was when I was just out of college. I was offered several positions right out of after school. The ones in Connecticut paid significantly less than the ones in New Jersey. But the first position I was offered in New Jersey was not ideal for me. But I was willing to seriously consider it, because the pay was so much more. You got to prioritize a little bit, and again, do the math and look at the big picture before you step into the office, because that, like you said, here in New Jersey, that is your only opportunity. Really, you're not going to get another opportunity later to say, hey, how about you skip a step for me? that doesn't really happen here.
John, I'm curious about your experiences as well.
I agree with everything you've said. I don't really have anything to add. We're musicians and educators. We're not business people, but it's the one time in our careers when we have to kind of put on a business hat and say, yeah, we got to make sure that, the salary is fair and equitable, that we check out our health insurance, is dental involved, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So we've now gotten all of our listeners their preferred jobs. They've now been hired, and all thanks to the three of us, because we're awesome. So what I want to know now is, John, are there any interviews from your time, either as music teachers or classroom teachers, or other specialists that you've hired? Are there any other interviews or interview stories that really stick out for good reasons?
Absolutely. I remember interviewing a 23-year-old who answered every question correctly, was so mature. And that person is now about in his 50s, I guess, and still just a master teacher. I'll never forget that interview, because we asked him some very detailed questions, and he had just great answers. I remember a teacher who did a demo lesson, a classroom music teacher in Madison, who memorized the name of every student during the lesson. And by the end of the lesson, could refer to every single student's name. Just kind of made a little diagram. Boom, 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 boom. It was incredible. I remember a teacher, a classroom teacher, who was so engaging and energized, so wonderful, master teacher. And at the end of the lesson, she wrote like the next day or the next 2 days, she wrote every student a note. I was blown away by what we did in our writing conference. Keep up the great work. Hope, have a great rest of the year. Signed, Mrs. So-and-so. Stories like that. I do remember a person coming in with a briefcase. This is going back a few years. looking very official. And after the interview, I saw that he opened his briefcase to put his resume back in, and the only thing that was in there was a hairbrush. It was a completely empty. Turned out to be an incredible musician and music teacher, but we never let him forget, the story about, good thing you brought that hairbrush to the
That was
interview.
a prop. That's so fun.
And he did have nice hair.
Okay.
He did. It was well coiffed. We didn't forget. We never forgot that interview or that person because that's the hairbrush guy.
Nice.
The only wacky one that I remember is we were interviewing a principal, and after every question, the candidate wrote down the question. So, tell us about your understanding of, standardized testing. We would sit there for like 30 seconds. This person, we're like, come on, we got work to do. Answer the question. Let's go. When you're a principal in Livingston, you got to be on the move.
Oh,
So that was a weird one. That person was not hired. That was the only really strange one that I recall. Mm-hmm. Most teachers are wonderful, and they do a really good job, and you feel for them because it's a tense situation.
Yeah.
I often feel bad that we can't offer more candidates the position.
That's hard to be in. I mean, as somebody, I'm sure with who's a human and has a heart, and you have all these people who are really trying to do their best and put their best foot forward, and having to say to so many of them, thank you, but no thank you. That's tough.
Oh, it's really tough. And I always did that. So for people that interviewed, I told them, I will call you. I will talk to you about our decision. And then they have the opportunity to say, is there something I could have done differently in the interview? Or is there a reason that you can articulate why you chose candidate A over me? And usually we would say they just had more experience, or they had experience in this grade level or with these students in a district almost exactly like ours. Mm-hmm. And you can't buy experience. You didn't do anything wrong. Right. But in Livingston, we were fortunate, and in Hanover Township, to be such great districts that we were able to hire people that had experience. And so every principal wants to hire a music teacher or art teacher or classroom teacher and say, we want this teacher to be a success, to energize kids, to excite them about the joy of music, so that when the students walk out of the classroom, they want to come back for more. And, we want to hire kid magnets. And honestly, we want to hire teachers that don't give us trouble, because we're so busy. We have such long days and long nights. And it's so wonderful when you get a teacher that is just like, oh my gosh, this is just a dream come true. They say hello to us every morning. They're kind, and then they go do their job. Kids love it. Parents are happy. Their colleagues love them.
Yeah.
Wow. What a hire. Because principals and supervisors have just crazy schedules. I had 500, up to 500 students and 75 staff members, and one of me. No assistant. It's a lot. It's a lot to work on. So when you get a teacher that's kind, friendly, positive, and doesn't add to your workload, it's like, this is a dream come true.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, that's really important. I know one of my administrators in the past he basically said to the music department at one point, you know why I really love this music department? It's because I never have to worry about anything you're doing.
Yeah, that's
and I
amazing.
totally get it. I totally get it.
And Livingston was so fortunate because they hired both of you, experienced educators, outstanding artists. And so you came already with, as you said, Erik, your bag of tricks. You knew what to do. You could be successful on day one. The challenge, of course, is the districts who hire that first year teacher who's right out of College of New Jersey or Montclair State or Rutgers or wherever. And we have to do a little bit more to support them.
Yeah.
And we have to do that because we need good young teachers in the profession who will stick with it and grow and learn and excite the next few generations about the joy of music.
Yeah. And like tonight's episode is we don't want the interview process to be the limiting factor. These people want to be there. We need to support them like before they even step in the classroom, right? So that's why we're here. That's what tonight's all about is making sure that, even if you're not getting this conversation in the program you're in, you're here, you're seeking out this information to help yourself get there. So yeah, we're here for you.
Yeah. And sometimes there's that it doesn't, especially maybe for a newer teacher or even a pre-service teacher, there's a disconnect between how good a teacher they are or they will be versus their interviewing skills. And just to be able to get better at the interview will allow that person to put their amazing teacher skills on display better. And I think that's what I'm hoping that people take away from this particular episode.
Very good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, do we have anything else that we're dying to go over here with the interview process? I mean, John, you have given us such a wealth of information, and it's been a blast to hear about this from the other side of the table.
My pleasure. I do feel that I've been very lucky to be in different roles in education. Very grateful for those opportunities, and it's now my job to continue to share what I can to help the next generation, because I'm getting up there. And one last thing to think about is just in keeping the job and getting tenure and all that stuff. Such a big part of it is relationships with the people at the school. So relationships with the school secretary, the school principal, the school custodian, the other teachers. Sometimes teachers' rooms can be sometimes a little bit dark because we all get tired and we're all struggling in a challenging profession. A rule of thumb for me was I tried to eat by myself or get work done during lunch 3 or 4 days, and then just eat in the faculty room 1 day a week, because I knew I was going to be exposed to some teachers that were complaining. That's really
good advice. I set a New Year's resolution for myself once, like, okay, eat in the teacher's room once a week. And I feel like that's the year that I really settled into the building I was in, because that's awesome. That's really a good comment.
Well, I'll tell you guys, thank you so much for doing this podcast, because I've really enjoyed. I think I've listened to 4 episodes now, and I will continue to do so. I think you guys are doing a great service for music education.
Oh, well, thanks so much. Thank you, John. And if any of our listeners would like to get in touch with you or ask a question or anything, is there what's the best way for them to get in touch?
I teach at Montclair Kimberly Academy, and I'm on that website, and our email is right there. So if you do want to reach out, whenever I sub over at Montclair State, I always say to the students, if you want me to double check your resume before you send it out, be happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John.
Yeah.
And so Jen, if our listeners really enjoyed this episode, they can subscribe if they haven't already on their favorite podcast app.
And you can also find us at Take a Cue Podcasts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
That's right.
We also have a very convenient link to become a supporter on our Anchor site, anchor.fm//Take a Cue. And you can, if you really, really love what you're hearing, connect with us there. Send us a little monthly donation. It goes right into our podcast, right into what we're doing. And we'd love to have your support. We're always looking for new ideas. So connect with us on social media. Send us ideas for episodes and ideas for what you want to hear about, who we should talk to, guests we should bring on. We're always happy to hear from our listeners about what's coming up next.
Indeed. All right. So I think this is where we wrap it up. All right.
Thanks.
Well,
Thank you.
to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. John, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Go out
John.
there and make great music with your kids.